Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to another Speak of the Devil. My name is Reverend Campbell, and today I'm being joined by the wonderful Priestess Josephine Seven. How are you, my dear?
I'm lovely. How are you?
I'm excited. It's been so long since we've talked.
Oh my gosh, I've been so crazy.
See, this is what happens when you have successful lives. Like, you just can't get
Yeah,
together as much as you'd like to. But we're here now, and that's good.
first world problems, right?
Right, yeah. Technology dependent, of course, because
Mm.
it's a bit of a headache sometimes. But we're alive, we're well, we're together for the audience. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about professionalism, how to manage others. We've got a lot to cover, a lot of ground to go over. Let me start by thanking you all for joining us live in the chat room. Robbie, Michelle, Valeria, Lauren, Ricky, Mr. Victor, good to see you, man. Frank, my man. Shane, Jim, who else? Wes, good to see you. All right, everyone, we're going to be having a fantastic discussion. If you have any questions or comments, Stephanie, how are you, my dear? If you have any questions or comments about the discussion, please put them up there. And if not, well, then just enjoy, I guess. I don't know. All right, so Josephine, what do you know about managing others?
You know, it's funny that you ask because I would claim to you that I know absolutely nothing.
Oh, no!
But apparently, I think I actually do seem to know some things because I am doing it and I guess doing it well and getting compliments on it. So I would say that I've had no formal schooling in it. However, I've been so fortunate to have kind of learned at the feet of great leaders. So I've just kind of taken my cues from them and kind of tried to do what they do because I think they did it so well, and I kind of wing it, I guess, is my best answer.
Well, I have to say, I really appreciate that answer because we often see this sort of anecdote that floats around, sort of Hollywood movies. We don't want you to do the job because you want the job. We want you to do the job because you don't want the job. And that means you're going to do a great job at it. It's like
Yeah.
every great leader typically are not the ones that want to be the leader. They are the ones forced into the position or otherwise evolve into the position. And I think, I don't know, maybe it might be a blanket statement here, but I think ambition sometimes gets in the way of good leadership and good management.
Well, I think something else people like, one of the things I've kind of learned over the years is that there's a difference between being a leader and being a manager.
Mm.
You know, um, I think when you're a leader, when you're a boss, you're more kind of just like, I don't want to say micromanaging because, managers have their thing, but managers are more like, I don't know, I feel like they're just kind of like the moment to moment administrative kind of, did you get your stuff done? Is your stuff done? Did you put your time in? Did you
Right.
fill out this paperwork? They're kind of just that person that's administratively responsible for things. But to me, being a leader is it's a little bigger. It's someone who kind of like challenges their team, they coach their team, they kind of help them plan long term. I think a manager is just like worried about making sure everyone gets their job done, whereas a leader is kind of making sure the mission happens, if that
Right.
makes sense. So, each has their own function in place, but I think too many people use the words interchangeably, and I do think there's a difference.
Well, that's really interesting because our conversation is framed around the idea of how to manage others. But I think the context of our conversation, off of what you just stated, is very much going to be around the idea of leading
Yes.
others. And so if we are going to make a distinction, let's clarify specifically for the audience that we are definitely in this context talking about leadership and helping not only those who may be under you in authority at a profession, but also perhaps just individuals that you meet in your daily life that maybe aren't quite peers. Maybe they put themselves a little bit below you and they look up to you for inspiration or suggestion or something like that. That's really the context of what we're going to be speaking to today, I think.
I agree.
Just for a couple people who popped in, Angel and Chris, great to see you. Thank you for joining us live here. Pi, always great to see you, man. So let's start what I'd like to do, because something that I never anticipated, and I'm not entirely sure anyone of my generation or older anticipated it either, but the workforce has changed
Yes.
from my generation to the current. And I never would have thought that I was 3 generations from the current generation, but I think I might be, especially in the workforce and directions that are necessary in order to reach the individuals. So we're going to be sharing personal experience. We're going to be sharing some time-honored traditions of leadership. But always keep in mind that one size doesn't fit all. There's always exceptions to the rule. And what we're trying to do is give you a best foot forward to move with, but you may find something in your personal experience that just works a little bit better, or just, doesn't work the way that we're suggesting. So always keep an open mind, always question, and always exercise your own judgment when operating here in the real world. So where do you think is a good place to start when putting the mindset of leading other individuals in a business context? I mean, where would you start as a leader?
I think one of the biggest things I've had to, I guess the biggest mindset shift I've had to make personally is I'm no longer like, I'm trying not to say this in a way that sounds bad, but I'm no longer one of the little people. I'm like one. Well, let me give you a little anecdote. So for years, I was in a position where, like at work, if we had a holiday party or a potluck or a big meeting or something, I was the person that would run around and make sure everything was set up right. And I would make sure that everyone knew what they needed to do. And I would be the one setting up before it happened and breaking down afterwards. And I was that person running around, like making everything happen, right? And I remember, like, when it was time for whatever to start, I would go get my boss and I'd be like, hey, everything's ready. Everyone's waiting for you. It's showtime, and then they would stop working and they would get up and they would come in and they would kind of make their appearance and do their thing. And then everyone would be like, yay, and clap. And then everyone would be like, okay. And then they'd kind of nod and shake hands. And then they'd go back to their office and work while the rest of the people did their thing, right? And that was really how things went for such a long time for me. And then with this new position I'm in, as some people know, I'm a chief officer now. It's like the last 2 years we've had our Christmas party and I haven't done anything. Like, I don't set it up. I don't pick the napkins. I don't get the drink. I mean, I'm the person that sits in their office and works now until someone comes and gets me and tells me it's time to talk to the people. and it's a strange feeling to be that person now, to be the person that everyone looks to be like making the decisions and to be in charge and to lead. That's a huge mind shift if you're not used to it. And it was funny because I was joking around with one of my old bosses, and I'm like, I used to be able to just look at my boss and be like, ain't my fucking problem. Like, what are you going to do about it? And now it's like, it is my fucking problem now. Or as the sign in my office says, it is your circus and they are your monkeys.
Oh, no.
So to me, that's I think people who can't make that mind shift and step up and own that, because there is a mindset now where people are afraid to be the boss or the bad guy or the parent, or they kind of see that as like, oh, that's the asshole. The boss is the asshole, or the parent is the asshole, or the bad cop. It's like, you've got to be that person now. You've got to be the one that says no sometimes, or that corrects people. And obviously how you attend to those duties are going to be how you're seen as a leader. But if you can't step up and own that that's your responsibility now, that you can't just look to someone else and pass the buck, that you're the one that now has to be responsible for that. And it kind of ties into that book I mentioned too. That's the huge mind shift that I think you need to embrace and own, and take a deep breath and be like, I've got to do this now.
Yeah. Well, what I think is interesting is that coming up in the workforce as a young man, it very much seemed like it was inevitable that you would just, as someone coming into a company, that you were in that company for the long haul, you would come up at the beginning level and you would just work your way up through the ranks and you would end up in a position of authority, and then you would be the person in charge. But that
and then you'd retire and get your gold watch.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, we're the same generation, aren't we?
I think so. And it's different. Like, that's not how the world works anymore.
No.
And so I don't know, because not everyone ended up in that same position of rising through the ranks and becoming, placed in a position of authority by their peers or their managers, by their leaders, or being trained. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. I don't think everyone is capable of that. And that's why you sort of filtered up, through.
Right.
And so I think while we're having this conversation, we need to make it clear that not everyone, and in some context, I am very much in this position of not being able to manage specific types of individuals or in specific arenas. That's just not my strength. And recognizing whether or not you are capable in your chosen profession to be in a position of authority or leadership is really important going into it, because that's going to help you frame your personal goals. You can't just look at it in the context of, well, I'm just going to work my way up through the ranks, because that's just, one, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not setting realistic goals, perhaps, for yourself, but also you're just not being very specific. And if you're just taking this sort of vague approach to things, you may not realize your full potential. And ideally, what we're going to do with these series of conversations is help you realize what your potential may be, and help you sort of work through those through our conversations and through your own self, questioning and self-actualization. So in the context of the generations that we came up in, because things are so different, I do want to cover some kind of managing or slightly leadership basics. And because these are not going to be industry specific, they may sound a little bit vague to some of you, but just think of them in the context of sort of tools in a leadership's belt that may be applicable to your industry and maybe not. And we'll sort of, adjust fire as necessary as we're having the conversation. What I found online, which I thought was kind of interesting, were 6 domains to managing others. And the first one of the 6 was demonstrating strength of character as the leadership role, as the managerial role, and how important it is to... And again, these are going to sound dated because we live in a different workforce now, a workforce environment in some industries.
Though. They shouldn't. I don't think integrity and honor and character should be a dated thing. And that's just my...
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
God damn it. Get off my lawn. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted.
No. I think that is funny, because I do genuinely at times, having conversations like this, feel like that, proverbial old man on the porch, like, in my day. And it's rough because industry dependent, things are very much old school and will remain that way because they have to, because they work. But there are some industries, primarily, I think the most obvious example would be, your stereotypical Silicon Valley tech industries, where things are very much different. And so again, we'll adjust those as necessary here. But to your point, it is incredibly important to maintain integrity and be above reproach in all that you do. If you are not honest with who you are as a leader, as a manager, there's no reason why those underneath you will feel the responsibility of being honest, or not only being honest with themselves about what they're capable of, but being honest about you, about what they're supposed to be doing, living up to the responsibilities that you're assigning them. Always keeping your word. This is something that I tend to find Satanists every once in a while banding about with this idea of honesty. And I think there is a difference between abject honesty and honesty in the interest of an end goal. If you're managing, let me try to unpack that. If you're managing other human beings, if you're expecting those other human beings to interact with you in a professional and positive way, it's the responsible thing to be abjectly honest with them. And that doesn't mean that you can't use some lesser magic through that process. But if you're not at a base level of honesty, then there's no way that you can move forward as a manager or a leader.
All right, and I think keeping your word is more of an integrity issue than an honesty issue, if that makes sense. Because, like, someone could come up to me, like, we have this one person at work who, let's just say that they are not the brightest crayon in the box. And if they are to ask me, like, well, what do you think of this? You know, I could give them an honest answer. It, you know, probably would be kind of mean, and I'm sure they would get very hurt feelings about it. Or I could find a way to be honest, yet be honest in a way that was, you know, like you said, lesser magic. And some people could say I was lying, and I can own that. But I don't see that as, you know, that's different than, like, if you say I'm going to do X, then you really need to keep your word and do X. And that's different to me than, like, does what I'm saying make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I think that's great, because there is a complexity involved when it comes to honesty and trust as a leader, and expectation. And part of that is, of course, admitting your mistakes and being accountable for your actions. This is very much a Satanist specific idea, I would argue. You know, that whole responsibility to the responsible mantra of ours. And then you mentioned extreme ownership. So do you want to talk about that?
So there's a book, it's called Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. And it's by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And it was a New York Times #1 bestseller. I've read it once. I'm actually in the process of rereading it right now, just because I think I like to refresh myself occasionally with certain books to just kind of like put my mind back in focus around things. And what I really love about the book is if you've never worked with military or Navy SEAL type folks, there's this incredible like honor and integrity with, you know, not every single one of them, but I'd say like a good 95% of them are pretty awesome. And their big thing is being accountable and owning what they're responsible for. And they actually go through in the beginning of the book. It's pretty interesting because they talk about like BUDS training, which is the basic underwater demolition and survival school that they all have to go through as like the SEAL training. And he talks about like the mindset you have to go through it. And there was this one part in the book where he talks about like there were these two boats, because they all have to like drag this boat around with them through the entire training. And one team was like just consistently bad and was always last. And this other team was like always #1. And so they look at leadership as part of your training. And so the guy that was in the losing boat, who was supposed to be their captain, you know, he kept making all these excuses. He was blaming his team. He was like, my team sucks. We'll never win. You know, he kept like putting everything off on everyone else. So they switched captains, and they took the guy who had the losing team and they put him in the winning team boat, and they took the winning guy out and put him in the losing team boat. And the next race, the team that had been in the last place the whole time, that was the worst, they beat everyone else. They won because it was their leader. And, you know, they talked about like how he came in and how he took ownership of the team, and he was like, you know, he stopped blaming everybody for everything, and he was encouraging them. And it was just really interesting because then they take these things and they talk a lot about what happened in Iraq and Ramadi and all the different places. And they give a lot of very specific, battlefield examples of having to own things, like when things went south, when things went wrong, when communications broke down, when there was friendly fire. But then they take that and they translate that into the workplace. And they've formed a company. I'm trying to remember the name. I'm going to flip over the book. I want to say it's called Echelon Front or anything. But what they do is, now that they're no longer active duty, they will go and consult with companies and leadership teams and other teams to be kind of like, this is how you need to step up and how you need to take ownership, and this is how you need to lead your people. And I really like the book. If you're interested in leadership, I really highly recommend it. It's not a long read. It's a fairly quick one. You could probably get through it in a day. or, a cozy afternoon. But it's a really great example if you're interested in kind of like taking your leadership game to the next level. And, in my opinion, some of the best leaders I've ever dealt with have been military.
Hmm.
So I kind of look to them as role models in a lot of cases. So it's a book I highly recommend.
I think that's great because a lot of what you're going to find, I think, as an individual is that even if you're not in the middle of Afghanistan facing down insurgents, you're still going to be able to take away some of the lessons and life experiences that some of these individuals have had in those situations in order to apply them to your much safer and less exciting lives, less life-threatening lives that we have all, the majority of us lead on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm.
So the lessons are still there. I would say that sometimes when people think about whether it's a manager of a professional sports athletic team or whether it's a veteran of of a conflict overseas, they tend to think, well, that's much more aggressive or intense of a situation than I'll ever find myself in. But that's not to say that you're still not going to be able to garner some influence or some life experience from what they have experienced. So definitely
Oh,
check it out if you have an opportunity. Another option here is to develop and share your experience. This is something that I had been introduced to way back in college, and that was that if you're going to learn something, it is your responsibility, if you're part of an industry, to pass what you've learned on, and the importance of mentorship in addition to positive leadership. I think this is incredibly important, and you're going to be able to do this through not only understanding the industry that you're in, keeping up to date with the techniques and technology, if applicable to your industry, of what's current, but also staying like up to date in the know with those in the industry. A lot of industries have professional organizations that you can become members of. And what this is going to do is not only keep you in communication with your peers, but they're going to share their experience so that you can then pass that down as a leader to those coming up behind you. In the integrity of whatever industry you're in, it is essential to have that sort of, learning process from the peers that have, come before you. Is that something that you find in your industry?
Oh, 100%. I can probably at least 5, if not more, personal mentors in my field. And then I have, mentors that have been in management. Um, something I got the phenomenal, amazing, just incredible opportunity to go to Harvard this year
Nice.
and take a course through their business school on leading conflict resolution. And, laugh all you want about Harvard and, make all the jokes you want. But I will tell you what, hands down, one of the most incredible, most valuable times I've ever had learning anything. Because, like I said, I wasn't formally schooled in management.
Hmm.
I've got like a math and science background, not a tell people what to do background. So, what was really phenomenal was in that course, we met some really interesting, amazing people. There's like a gentleman who opened I forget which embassy it was. It was one of the ones in Afghanistan. And he actually sat with us for an entire day and walked us through stuff and answered questions. Um, the nice thing about it when you go to these kinds of specialized trainings is that you're considered a class, and then everyone exchanges their information. And because you've all worked on your business issues together, like in a group setting, and you've mentored each other. I mean, it was fantastic. I brought something with me, and they sat and spent like 6 hours one day walking through everything with me. Have you thought about this? Have you considered that? Did you know this was an option? Have you looked into this? And I'm like, holy shit, like slow down. I'm taking notes. I literally left with like 12 pages of notes of things that I could do better. And it was interesting. I came back to the company and I said, hey, we fucked up. We did. We fucked up because we didn't do this right. we did our people that were having an issue, we did them a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't do this right. We didn't manage this conflict correctly. We did not give them true resolution. We did not do this right. It's our fault, and we need to take ownership of that. And I suggest we get a professional mediation company in here and be like, we're sorry, we did this wrong. Give us an opportunity to make this right. And let's bring some professionals in here, because on top of that, I don't think that we can be seen as impartial at this point, because it's gone too far. So we need to bring impartial mediators in. We need to really work this out. And son of a bitch if it didn't work, But the fantastic thing was, in the process of all that, I now have like 16 classmates from that class that I still keep in touch with, that are from amazing companies like Hilton and, like a couple big pharmaceutical companies. And I believe there was a guy from Microsoft there, and there were even some Harvard people there. And it was just amazing, because like any of them now, I can reach out to them and I can say, hey, what do you think I should do about this? Or I've run into this now. Or they'll reach out to me and ask me the same question. And it's really neat, because now I'm like, I have a professional mentorship, but I don't have a managerial, like, chief officer type of group. And now I have one, just because I went to that one training. So if there's anything like that locally that you have, or an opportunity, like if your company asks you, like, what do you want to do to build your career? See if you can find something like that in the area that you want to grow in, and ask to attend that, and then start making those connections with people that are your peers at other companies that you can turn into your network and you can reach out to for advice, guidance. Like, oh shit, you've been doing this for do you know who I met? One of the women who was there is actually the provost of the University of New Zealand.
Oh.
Or I mean, she like runs the entire freaking school. And she was an older lady. She was brilliant, and she was smart, and she was so cool. And she like gave me her card. She's like, let's keep in touch, And I mean, now I have contacts like that all around the world, that I can reach out to at any time. And that is just awesome. If you get the opportunity for that, and even if you can't attend like a big class, if you just go to like local functions or little conferences or something, go up to somebody, introduce yourself, shake their hands, exchange cards, say, hey, I'm kind of new to this. Could I reach out to you if I have a question, or can I run some things past you? Can I buy you dinner? And I guarantee you, good people that you're going to want to keep in touch with are always going to say yes. Absolutely, 100% every time.
Yeah, I think that's so incredibly important. And I think it's too easy to fall into that trap of thinking, well, I'm only focused on myself in this profession. I'm only focused on my own success. So anyone that comes up to me is somehow a competition or something. And in a professional environment, I think that is a poisonous way to think, because not only are you going to be limiting your own scope, your own ability, your opportunity to learn or grow, you're also like poisoning the well of your profession, of whatever that industry is.
Well, and there's always going to be people that know more than you. I mean, just suck it up and admit it. And I mean, I was in tears at the end of the 6 hours up there, because I'm like, I wanted to say I was stupid, and I'm like, I can't say that. I'm not stupid. I'm not a stupid woman, but I don't have this background, and I'm being honest about that. And just the wealth of information that you can get from people that are more than happy to help, if you just shut the hell up and like put your ego aside and listen. Yeah. You will be so much better and so much smarter if you can surround yourself with phenomenal people that can give you advice, and if you listen. That's just the biggest thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that goes into the next logical step of what we're speaking to here, of building your own personal team. And not everyone is going to have a team environment in their industry, but for those that do, it's incredibly important to foster a sense of community. You need to empower those that are within that community, educate, train, and equip them to be more effective in their jobs, and of course, setting a good example through your behavior and your accomplishments is as a member of that team. What do you think about the importance of teamwork, really quickly?
If you're in a team environment, I mean, anyone who's ever watched a sport,
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone on here ever watches like soccer, like footy. Like I love watching the Premier League in England, Chelsea. Go Chelsea. If you've ever watched some of those teams play, like Germany especially, like Germany is my national team, my favorite. Just watching them play it's phenomenal, just to literally take a long view and just see how they can all, like, at opposite ends of the field, read and turn and shift, and it's beautiful. And then if you watch a team that's like crap and doesn't know how to play, again, it's just so obvious they're not working together. You know, if you have one person that's like, oh, I'm the superstar, I'm gonna hog the ball all the time, and he won't cooperate with anyone else. I mean, you can just tell when you have teamwork and when you don't. And, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to make that. I think that's the hard part, is when you get different personalities and you get different. I've struggled with that a little personally, because we really make a big deal about interviewing and making sure that the person doesn't just have a skill, but they have the right personality to join the team.
Yeah.
You know,
You can be
and that's
trained in
important.
skills.
That's important. And one of the things, and I needed to say this for a very long time, like, I'm dealing with a lot of people right now that are incredibly, like, anxious and depressed and constantly, like, hammering on themselves. And they are just so, like, they don't understand why nobody wants to work with them. And they don't understand why they can't get a job. And they don't understand why they can't get ahead. And it's like, dude, you walk in and all you do is constantly say what a shit job you do. You constantly insult yourself. You constantly put yourself down. You're a drag to be around. I'm like, nobody wants to work with that. You know? And if you come into an interview with me and the first thing out of your mouth is, well, I suck, I'm like, I'm not asking you to walk in here and lie to me, okay? Because don't do that. Don't be all like, oh yeah, I'm the shit, and you're not, right? Just, I mean, if you come in ahead of time and you're already acting like you're worthless, then why do you think I'm going to see any value in you? You know? And when I try to tell them this, I'm like, if you come in and tell me you're worthless, why should I argue with you? I'm like, you may think you are, but you don't need to tell everybody. I mean, you know, and it kind of boggles me, like you said, again, with this whole generational thing. The more I deal with the younger people, they just drag like this 8,000-pound weight of around with them. And it's like, I don't want to work with that. And it was interesting because Alpha was saying just the other day, because we're interviewing for a new position on the team, and there's this one guy and he's all like, oh, he's that Eeyore guy, right?
Oh no.
And you know, Alpha's like, I don't fucking have time for this shit. You just know your shit or you don't, but don't sit here and whine about it. It's like, if I would rather hire somebody who came in and said, I don't know how to do that, but give me 5 minutes, I'll figure it out. Or I don't know how to do that, but if you can spend a day with me, I can do it. You know, I'm ready. Like, let's go, 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 go. Yeah. I'd rather hire somebody who didn't know what they were doing and teach them because they had that attitude, like, yeah, bring it, versus someone who like came in who maybe was a rock star, but was like, you know, I'm like, oh, shut the hell up. It's like, no. And that, I don't know, when you were talking about generations, that's the big thing I see these days with like the younger kids, is this like perpetual Eeyore gloom, like, and they want like they want their hand held constantly. They want to be constantly reassured. It's like, I think we have on your thing, recognition is so fucking important. You've got to do good recognition. And I am like the queen of recognition. I always am doing little things for my folks, buying them gifts, praise, like awards. I'm all about that. But I am not going to sit there and fucking hold your hand all day. And I am not going to spoon feed you. You know? Yeah. There's a huge difference between the two.
And it's always that struggle, I think, between an individual who sees it as a job or they see it as a profession, because one is just a temporary thing that they're doing in order to make money, and the other is
Yeah.
something that they want a long-term involvement with that is going to help shape their future, and that they're going to be, and this is, I think, the ultimate struggle for the Satanist, because on one hand, we have to recognize that we are individuals that are very different from the majority of others in this world.
Yeah.
And that makes us special in our own way. And I say that because some
I
people
was gonna
take it
say
to
it
the
makes
extremes.
we're our own little snowflakes. from
Yeah.
now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's also, we have to, part of that awareness, I think. And to be fair, a lot of Satanists I've met have understood this. Part of that awareness is to know that you're not the only reason why you are successful, is that you have leaned, on those who have come before you, or the suggestions of your peers, or the favor of someone in the profession that you're trying to get into, being granted those opportunities that are beyond your just natural inclination of lesser magic, but that you've been given opportunities not because you're a special individual, but because you're willing to put the effort in. And
Yes.
to what you're speaking to directly, we have to be able to get over ourselves and realize that, and to be honest about this, as kids, we look at adults and we're like, oh, they're all so much smarter and they have it all figured out. And then as you become an adult, you're like, wow, everyone's fucking stupid and no one knows anything. Like, nothing in life is challenging, like that difficult. Like, if you just read a little bit, like 8th grade level, you can figure everything out. Like,
you can.
Everything. So when faced with an obstacle that is just challenging to your average individual, a Satanist should be looking at it and is like, you know what, I got this. I may not be the best at it, but I'll tell you what, I'll give it a good goddamn chance, and I'll probably succeed better than the average person because I'm willing to try.
Oh yeah. Oh, I sat in a meeting one time, and we had a client who was like, well, I need this, and can we do that, and blah, blah. And Alpha just looked right at me, and he goes, she's our subject matter expert in that. She's got it. She can take care of that for you, no problem. And I'm thinking to him, like, I have no fucking clue what this man is talking about. Like, literally, I do not know what this man is talking about. So I'm taking notes, right?
Yeah.
And I joked with him afterwards. I'm like, you just like doing that to me, don't you? And he goes, oh, I know that whatever it is, you'll just go Google it and figure it out. I'm not even worried about it. He's like, you're a subject matter in everything. You just need to go like refresh. And I'm like, really? So now it's kind of our running joke, because he's literally like, it doesn't matter what it is. Underwater firefighting, she's got it. Physics, she's got it. Quantum computing, she's got it, and he's just like, and he didn't even blink. And I'm like, yep, I got it. It was funny when he gave me my big loss promotion to chief officer. He's like, you don't sound very nervous. And I'm like, I probably would be if I knew exactly what they did. And he just started laughing. I'm like, don't worry, I'll Google it later. And I did. I actually Googled it like right in front of him. I'm like, oh, I already kind of do all that. And he goes, I know, we're just going to make it official. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But I mean, literally, I had no idea. I was like, yeah, I'll Google it. It's no problem. I got this.
Nice. I do want to bring up, Dwayne has a really great comment in the chat room that I think is worth
I was reading that.
Restating. Anxiety is basically a fashion statement in today's world. It drives me nuts.
Is there like a way to like that? No, it's just, if I click, it says block. I won't do that. No, I did see that. Dwayne, good comment. I agree 100%.
It's crazy.
I like the way he said, it's self-depreciation is mistaken for humility.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I think you're right. I don't think I've ever heard it put that way, but I agree 100%. I really do. And where you said self-assured is treated as being arrogant. And that's why when you were making that comment about, Satanists, I'm like, yeah, we're basically like everyone, if they knew what was really going on in our heads and how we like really thought about ourselves, like for really truths, like we're awesome, they'd be like, Nazi. Like, if you have any self-confidence today, regardless of what it's about, it's like Nazi.
Right.
It's, oh Lord, save us.
It's always extreme.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're almost done with these initial points that are sort of core to being a good leader, a good manager, part of a team here. Another one of them is encouraging open communication, and this one can be challenging as a leader.
Oh God, yes.
I mean, if anyone's ever had kids, you know that it's very difficult to have open communication with your children, not because they don't necessarily listen all the time, but because you have to be able to listen and hear what they're actually saying. And that can be wounding to an ego. That can be challenging to hear and learn from, but it is so important to be able to hear what other people have to say and where they're coming from.
That is another good one. They do several stories on that in the Extreme Ownership book about talking about how if not to assume that you know what your people are thinking. And how to ask them to give you honest feedback, because a lot of times they're afraid to give you feedback.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be that person where when someone comes to you and is like, I got a problem with you, you'd be like, okay, let's see what we can do about this. Like, let's talk about it, and not immediately be all like, well, fuck you, asshole. You know, because, well, you have to be approachable, and you have to have your people like know that they can come to you and be like, we need to talk, you know, and that you're okay with that. You're not going to knee jerk, or you're not going to freak out, or, you know, get hysterical with them. And I hate to say this, but that's double for women, because we, I think, just historically have been seen as hysterical at times. And I hate to say this, but a lot of women are. A lot of women immediately get that whole like, you know, and the whole like, bitch, up in your face thing. Well, it's so huge on TV. It's big in memes. It's like we're seen as that. And so a lot of times other people and sometimes men are just afraid to come to us or be honest with us because they don't want to upset us. They don't want to make us cry. They don't want to make us yell and scream. You know, and that's, you know, something as a female. Like, I have a gentleman that works for me whose wife is an absolute raging cunt. I mean, like, literally, we talk at work, like, we actually, me and my CEO, who's a female, like, we literally talk about him specifically. Like, we have to deal with him in a very specific way because he brings that to work.
Wow.
And we like him. He's a good man. He's a good worker. We like him on the team, but we've realized over the years that there's just a special way we have to deal with him because of the way his wife treats him. He's got to feel like he's got somewhere that he's not a doormat. So we have to act differently with him because of that. And I think as a leader and a manager, you really do have to get to know your people and understand that, you know, whereas I can talk to one guy this way, I could never talk to him that way because I have literally had him flip a table and walk out, like throw a temper tantrum and walk out because he didn't get his way. And I'm like, how old are you? But then when I really we really started putting the pieces together, and it's like, you know what? He goes home and we've met his wife. She is just, oh my God, she's horrible. Like, if we ever found out one day he strangled her, I would be like, yep, all right.
We saw that coming.
Saw that one coming. But you think about that. If all he does from the minute he gets home is like get nagged and picked and bitched at and just screamed at and yelled at and harped on and then he comes in and he's like, I want it to be blue. We're like, okay. Or if we want it to be a different color, we have to kind of like,
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah. But you know what? I do throw that out as a female. You have to think about how you look to other people that you're leading. Yeah. Because I think you're scrutinized a little closer, because even though women have been in command or have been in charge for a very long time, it's still not a predominantly female role to be that much of a leader. So you just I think you have to just check yourself, you know. Yeah. You have to be careful how you present yourself, and you don't want to kind of feed into any of those stereotypes that will end up making your life more miserable because you're unapproachable, or you're difficult to work with, or you're disrespectful to your staff. And because I do see some women kind of go overboard with it, like, fuck you, asshole. Like, they try to be too much one of the guys, you know? Yeah. And I worked with this one woman who was so horrible to everyone because she kind of decided to act like the asshole guy boss. And she was just horrible to everyone because she thought she had to be like that to be accepted as a leader. And it's like, no. And so I'll see them like overcorrect, thinking I've got to be like that for anyone to take me seriously or to respect me. And it's like, it's not really how it works.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think, unfortunately, that in some industries, because there is this sort of, good old boys club, there is that mentality of, well, this is in the sort of cultural zeitgeist. I must play into that if I want to get ahead in this industry. We just had the huge Me Too movement break out of the film industry, specifically because women just had enough. Like, they didn't want to have to deal with it.
Wait. You mean the Me Too movement led by the woman that was like screwing underage kids?
Okay,
was
so
it that one, or
that was one of them, yes.
Female politician that was groping the guy on her staff.
My gosh.
I can't keep them all straight.
Okay, well, this is a whole new conversation we're going to have another day, because this is interesting.
But that plays into what I'm saying about being a hypocrite, or like, if you're out there and you're like, oh, you shouldn't touch people who don't want to be touched. And yet, meanwhile, you're like grabbing your staff boy's ass. It's
right.
Like, no, you can't do that. You can't. And then it goes back to your integrity. I don't know. We've got 8,000 more shows off that one sentence alone. I'm sorry.
Seriously. But I mean, to your point, and to the point of the conversation, that is very much how it is. Society dictates that things should be this way, and we play into that more often than not. We just feel like we must move into it. And whether it's just power itself feeling like it's giving us the okay to act a certain way or to behave in a certain way, or if it's the industry that's encouraging it, or in the very minimum, turning the blind eye, people will follow suit. And I do genuinely feel like, and my point of bringing it up is that times are changing, that people are adjusting their behaviors. There's a very real cultural example of this right now, where black men and women have to train their sons and daughters in how to act in the position of when in the company of police, or a majority white room. Like, you have to act differently depending on your audience. And this is, a lot of minorities have to deal with the reality.
I don't know. I think everyone has to do that, though. Like, I don't think it's just black people that have to employ that change. I mean, you could say that about women. You could say that about, gay men. You could kind of say that just about anybody. You always have to play to your audience, and you have to adjust.
Absolutely. I mean, there's the extreme examples of the consequences of not doing so, more being upon some minorities than others. But to your point, absolutely everyone. I mean, that's lesser magic in and of itself. We have to play to our audience, knowing where you are. But that just feeds into the point of, we have to understand the cultural climate that we're in, whatever that industry may be, and whatever it may foster, and know where we want to fit in that climate in order to progress that profession or that industry forward, and especially as a leader, and putting yourself really in a position of above reproach almost, so that you don't find yourself being one of those statistics in those industries. Another example here is, and you and I have spoken to this in a whole show actually, is planning and organizing. Yes. On a daily basis. This is not only, as we spoke to on an earlier show, incredibly important for the individual, but as far as a group dynamic goes, it is insanely important. Understanding what needs to be done in a given time period, and then being able to meter out responsibilities in order to see it done. And this is huge. And the last bit here I wanted to cover would be the challenging and developing of others, knowing your team members, recognizing their performance, and when it is above and beyond, letting them know that it is. And then giving actionable feedback. And that doesn't always mean positive. Sometimes that means negative, but doing so in a way that encourages them to grow, or at least have the opportunity to grow from that feedback. And then, of course, coaching others. Is there anything you wanted to touch on that?
I was going to say, I thought it was interesting when I attended the Harvard thing that they told us, you know how I was always taught to do the whole, like, what do they call it? The sandwich thing, where you say a nice thing and then you say like kind of a criticism, and then you kind of put a nice thing on the other end. So you kind of like bury it so that it's like you kind of pat it so it's not so hurtful or upsetting. And one of the things that they were teaching us was don't do that. Do not make the negative sandwiches, was they called it. Well, they said what happens is if you do that, then you kind of you downplay it and you're not being clear. So they were like, first of all, keep any criticism or constructive criticism, keep it private. Like you don't want to do it in front of everybody else, right? And you want to be firm when you state it and just be like, this is something I've noticed. Appear to be struggling. How can I help you? Or, is there a tool you need, or is there training you need? Is there something I could be doing for you to help you overcome this challenge that you're having? So you kind of include yourself in it, without, because I had this one person one time that was literally calling someone stupid for doing something different. It wasn't even wrong. It was just different. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like, and they thought they were being a leader. And I'm like, well, I'm managing them. I'm telling them when they're wrong all the time. And I'm like, oh, okay, apparently we need to get you some training too. But that was the one big thing they said is don't sandwich that don't like try to bury the criticism to soften it, like to be clear with it and to be to the point with it and to be very specific with it, so that they understand the seriousness of what you're asking them to address, which I thought was really interesting because I have always been taught all my life, say a nice thing, then kind of slide it in, and then say another nice thing so they don't feel bad about it. And the quote professionals were like, don't do that. And I'm like, when they kind of explained why, I'm like, that actually does make a lot of sense though,
Yeah.
because I think, at least you and I think I've always appreciated if someone came to me and said, hey, you need to do this differently, or, I think this is going to work better if you do it. I've always liked someone who just shoots straight with me.
Yeah.
And so I guess I try to do that with others as well. Unfortunately, I will say it doesn't always work the way I think it's supposed to work because, well, I do get people that are literally hysterical or who you literally don't even say anything critical and they still like spin it in their head that way. So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm literally still learning how to deal with people like that because I have this one person. I actually had this one person ask me if they could do something for me. And I said, no, thank you. And they're like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, I'd just rather do that myself. Are you saying I can't do it?
Yeah.
Are you saying I'm not competent enough? Are you saying I'm not capable? I'm like, no, I said I'd rather do it myself. I don't see when I've ever done anything to make you think I could. I mean, they're literally like screaming at me in my office. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, I'm literally like, what? like, can you pause while I call my friends from Harvard and say, what the fuck do I do now? Because I'm like, I didn't even actually criticize them. So like with this one person, I'm literally still learning how do you handle people like that on your team, and how do you have those conversations with them. Hit me up again in a year. Maybe I'll have an answer for you. Because and I think that, I guess maybe that's my point is there's no book, there's no class, there's nothing that's going to tell you how to deal with everyone perfectly all the time.
Absolutely.
And when you have a team where you have like 13 people and each of them has a different personality and half of them hate each other and you're like, shit, I got to make things happen. And I've got this motley crew of individuals that I have to keep from killing you. It's almost like being a parent. That's why I kind of asked. I think that's why some women make really good managers is because they're used to dealing with squabbling children constantly. Well, think about it.
I think that's
Back
fair.
from our day, the dad would go to work all the time, so he wasn't home to deal with that. but the mom was, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at like women that are a little older that have kind of raised all those kids, and especially if they have like more than one child and they're all still alive and none of them are in jail, I'm like, okay, that gives you an extra star on the interview, you know?
Yeah. I love that qualification.
Well, I
They're all
mean,
still alive
seriously,
and not in jail.
if you've ever watched a mom with like 4 kids and she's like managed to like keep them all alive through the day
Yeah.
and, you know, the paint's still on the walls, it's like that's impressive. And if
Mhm.
you can do that with like 3-year-olds, you know, chances are you might be able to handle the 30-year-olds. Just maybe.
Well, I mean, I do think it's important what you're saying here is that, you know, obviously your statement of not one technique is going to cater to every individual. We are all individuals in the truest sense of the word. And so that's why we have these sort of broader generic instructions to sort of go by. And we have to all understand that because we don't always know where the individual is coming from, their life experience, how they ended up the way that they are. That's why it's so incredibly important to have perspective and being open to hearing what they're actually saying versus what they're saying in the moment, because sometimes those messages are very different. And it does take effort, as you know, it's one of those things, you know, you're taught to be a leader through experience, not through instruction. I mean, it's something that you
Yes.
really have to cut your teeth on in order to really get a sense of it. And every leader will tell you that they have failed more than succeeded. And that's how they've been successful in life is through failure and learning from that. And so having that perspective is so incredibly important, not just as a Satanist for lesser magic, but also as an individual in an industry in order to be a leader of any value to those underneath you. So I mean, we're sort of at our time wall here. Do you want to talk about some of these differences in the 2 newest generations from our own really quick? Do you have some time?
Um,
This sigh.
I'm trying not to make a sandwich, right?
Right, yeah. Don't make a sandwich.
Say something positive. Say something. Okay, let me qualify this. As much as I kind of sometimes bitch and moan about millennials and stuff like that, there are some really amazing kids out there.
Right.
And I actually was fortunate enough. We homeschool my daughter, and she is in a co-op. So, very long story short, one of her teachers has a son who's interested in what I do. And she asked if he could meet with me and ask me questions. And I said, absolutely. He's in high school. Really great freaking kid. I mean, he was amazing. He was bright. He was enthusiastic. He was polite. He was just, you know, he had his shit together, like more than some adults I know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of like gave him an opportunity to help me with something at a conference, and he just blew me away. He was amazing. And I got so many compliments on him from people who knew that I brought him in. So then we usually do internships at my company, and we usually take kids from the 2 big schools in the area, UVA and Virginia Tech. But this kid was still in high school. He was a junior. And I'm like, I want him to have an internship. And I just literally did everything I could do until I found a spot for him, and I found some projects for him to work on. And I'm like, and I brought him in and I introduced him to Alpha. I connected them up. And then Alpha was like, holy crap, this kid's amazing. And guess what? He now works for us part-time.
Nice.
Like literally. And he is, you know, and Alpha was saying to me, he's just like, this kid, he's like, he's bright and he's enthusiastic and he's got a great attitude. And he's like, he knows he doesn't know everything, but he wants to learn. And if you tell him he did something wrong, he's like, okay, how can I do it right? You know? So not every millennial and not every, you know, one of the young, you know, not all the younger generation is like this. I mean, you know, for humor's sake, I will go off on rants, but I will say that not all of them are like that. And you still will run into kids that have been raised the way I would say right, you know, to be well, to be respectful to their peers,
Yeah.
to be respectful to others, to have manners, to have, you know, a good team playing, It's kind of funny. People are like, why do you want someone who's done sports? Well, I think a lot of places will look at if you've played on a sports team to know, can you play on a team? It doesn't mean were you the best guy and you made the most baskets or the most goals, but it meant, could you be on a team, and you survived 4 years of that without everyone killing you or like short shooting you or something. So people, I think colleges and jobs do look at your extracurricular activities to see, like, do you participate in things that show that you can be a good team player or a good group member, and I use sports as an example, but theater is another example. If you have produced a play and you've acted in one and you've had to work with everybody in a play, I mean, that's the same thing. They just want to see that you can get along with others, because that's kind of an important thing to be able to do in the workplace. And if you can't show, we were just literally, so P's old enough to start looking at colleges now. God, I need to lay down when I say that. But one of the interesting things, because we homeschool, that the gentleman, he's the admissions officer with William and Mary, he was talking to everyone, and I had asked, like, what do you guys worry about the most when you see a homeschool application versus like a public school? And he says, honestly, it's the socialization. We want to know, like, did this kid like sit in the kitchen for like 12 years and can't hold a conversation with anyone? Like, what are they going to contribute to the campus environment? What are they going to bring to the university? Like, it's not just a set of grades that are going to come to school here. It's a person. And is that a person we want to be here to add to what we see as our, as our class? And I think companies look at that too. Like, if all you do is sit in your basement and eat Cheetos and play video games, like, I'm not seeing a lot of social skills there, right? And you may not think that's important, or you may be like, yo, introverts unite, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. Well, I'm a tremendous introvert, so I get that. But at the same time, if I need you to come into my workspace and I need you to actually interact with people and not make everyone angry or frightened or sad or frustrated, I need to see that you've got those people skills, Yeah. So, absolutely. And I think that I've seen crappy behavior from people in every generation, and I've seen fantastic behavior from people in every generation. So I think at the end of the day, and I'm just going to put it out there because it really is summarized. If I talk to a manager, I get the feeling that they think they're important. But when I talk to a leader, they always make me feel important.
That's great.
And I think that every single generation, at the end of the day, everyone just wants to feel like they're important and that they're a valued member of your team. And if you can make your staff and the people that you, quote, manage and lead, if you make them all feel like they're important, like they're respected, and they're like part of the team, you're gold.
Yeah.
If you can walk away with that, you're gold.
I think that's great. That's a wonderful way of looking at it. And there are some, I always over anticipate the amount of time that we're going to have to cover a topic. And so, there's some economic reasons why the different generations are that share these broad stroke traits that they do, and why as a leader you need to address them in different ways. And maybe that's going to have to be a conversation for a different day, because these are broad strokes and not really specific to individuals. And I don't want to undercut the point that you just made, because I think it's so incredibly important that no matter what, the bottom line is we're all human beings with a need to feel like we're a valued member of the team. And whether that means we take a different approach to the workday or the way we communicate or the expectations that the leader or the company has on the individuals, we need to be able to be malleable enough to adjust fire when necessary in order to cater in some way, not in all ways, but in some way, to the individual. And that's where you're going to find successful companies, is when they are capable of adjusting just a little bit and trying to meet their workforce in the ways that they're expected to meet them.
And as potential like future employees, keep in mind that, and this probably this audience is okay with me saying something like this, but not everyone can grow up and be an astronaut. And there are going to be some fields that you probably aren't suited for. I'm going to tell you right now, the women's NBA and I are never going to mix, okay? I don't jump and I don't run that fast, and I can barely hit the side of a wall with basketball. I am not going to sit here and demand that the NBA make special accommodations for me so that I can fulfill my dream of being a female basketball player. It's just not going to happen. You know, there's a lot of careers out there that I am not suited for. I don't have the skill set for. I'll never have that, like, that kind of, it's just not for me, you know? And I need to be like, that's okay. That's not where I belong. And I shouldn't, you know, I have a big thing about like certain demands being made, like in military environments or even in like firefighting or like police environments. There's a reason there are certain standards in place, you know? And guess what? You know, if you can't drag your buddy off the field who's, you know, weighs 300 pounds, maybe you don't need to be in that particular environment. Maybe you're better suited to support in a different way. But, you know, there's certain environments that you need to have a physical fitness, a skill, a height, a certain, you know, a skill set. And yes, we should accommodate others. You know, I go out of my way when we were building our new office. I've got, believe it or not, I know so much about ADA now because we have someone who had a stroke and they're in a wheelchair. And I have just like learned everything I could about like how to make certain things more accommodating for folks in wheelchairs, just so I can make sure that they were taken care of. And it's been fascinating to learn all this stuff. So yes, you should absolutely accommodate. But at the same time, I'm not going to expect the local fire department to accommodate so this guy in a wheelchair can be a fireman now. It's like, it's not going to happen. You need to just, you know, be a dispatcher if that's your dream, to support the firemen. So yes, companies should accommodate, but there's a point where you cross the line and you affect the ability to finish the mission if you're too accommodating and you dilute your skill pool and, you know, your expertise.
Yeah, I think that's brilliantly stated. I mean, even in those lesser immediate important roles of having required physicalities, you know, you had already touched on earlier in a conversation about maybe you just don't have the skill necessary to fulfill a role that you are seeking. And the truth is that, you know, not everyone can. And so that's why it's so important. We can't just leave it on, you know, incumbent upon the business or the industry in order to accommodate us. We have to have a realistic expectation of our own sense of success based on our realistic self-evaluation and abilities. And that is where we should start. Unfortunately, I don't think the majority of humans do, but and then we can move out from there. But as Satanists, we should certainly be starting from that point. Priestess Josephine Seven, it is always an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're so welcome.
This is great. I really do want to have another conversation about with you about some of these other generations, because there's a lot that we could get into on maybe a part 2 of this. But we've also touched on, just in our notes here, sort of behind the scenes, on some other topics that we can have other professionalism shows based on. So I would like to open this up to anyone watching this or listening to this live or after the fact. What do you guys want us to talk about? What do you think is something that you would like to hear an alternate perspective on in the context of professionalism? How you can grow as an individual or in an industry? What are those skill sets that maybe you would like to hear other people's perspectives on, or that maybe you want to learn about? Because I would argue that we could, if not directly address those, then we can at least read a little bit up on it so we know what we're talking about to address them.
I'm a subject matter expert in anything. Just give me 10 hours.
We're Google professionals here, people. We'll figure it out. I'd like to give a straight up shout out to those who joined us in the live chat. Thank you guys so much. It does mean a lot having your immediate interaction in this type of a format. and we are glad that you find some value into tuning in live, and hearing what we have to say, and then communicating your thoughts back to us. We do read the comments as they're coming up live, but we don't always find an opportunity to address them in the course of the discussion. So thank you guys very much for that.
What does Dennis mean by promiscuity? Promiscuity within the workplace? That's a new word for me. I should Google. Proper
tact could be one.
I think etiquette, business etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we could do a whole show on that.
Oh, absolutely.
We've done a talk before on that at a major conference.
I've actually made some big faux pas in that arena, so totally speak to that.
We could share some stories.
Hell yes.
No, but I was just wondering what he meant by, he didn't mean promiscuity, did he?
I don't know.
Dennis, can you clarify for us, darling?
Yeah.
Is he listening? I don't know.
If he's still there. There is like a 10 to 12 second delay depending on how, when people tune in and stuff. And just the streaming of this. So it could
the psychology of crafting your employer.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point. That's a conversation right there. All right, so we're going to have to end it there. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Priestess Josephine, until we can speak of the devil again. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.